In this video, we're going to explain the difference between civil law and criminal law, and we're going to tell you which one you should be focusing on. And we're going right now. I hate law. That does make sense. Does that make sense? It's like, it's not foreseeable, is it? Law, man. It ties you in knots, doesn't it? What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is a health and safety YouTube channel, podcast. It does exactly what it says on the tin. We're here to challenge the perceptions, challenge the health and safety gone mad practices. We're to provide simple advice on YouTube and really in-depth conversations on the podcast. So make sure you subscribe if you're new here, and don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss another episode. Today we're talking about civil law versus criminal law. We're going to cover the key differences because I think we get them mixed up. It's important that we understand that the processes are different, but also the consequences are different as well. And also, I'm going to touch on why I think one of them is the one that you should focus on more than the other. So make sure you listen till the end. I just want to say that I am 100% the furthest thing from a lawyer that you could ever get. This is layman's terms. This is how it's been explained to me over the years and my own interpretation of that. If I have said something that is not legally right and you know better, please drop it in the comments. Let's go. Okay, first let's cover some basic differences. How does each law come about? Criminal law is basically on paper and civil law is not. What do I mean by that? Criminal law goes through Parliament. It's done by bills and drafts and debates, etc. And it produces a written piece of legislation. So, Health and Safety at Work Act or the Road Traffic Act. Legislation, regulations, the law. Civil law is built on case studies. So when a case is decided, that sets what we call a precedent. So when a similar case happens, they'll look back on that previous precedent to determine how they decide the next one. And it's not really written down. Now you can go and read the case studies on the internet, but it's not produced in a written law. So why do the two exist? Criminal law is there to protect society as a whole. And civil law is to essentially protect you from yourselves. So it's there to resolve differences between one person and another, or a person and an organisation. We're going to run through the process. So we're going to start with a fatality and or serious incident. So from a criminal point of view, we're looking at a written down piece of legislation. So the Health and Safety at Work Act. And obviously this is from a health and safety point of view, so health and safety law. We've had our fatality, we've had our serious incident. Now we're going to go through the criminal case. The enforcing body, someone like the HSE or the local authority like a council or the fire service for a fire, they will eventually decide whether they're going to bring a case against you. So let's assume they are, which will go to court and eventually come up with a fine or jail. But let's just break that down a little bit more. What they're trying to do in court is define whether you have broken the law based on the duties that are defined in the law. Remember we said it was written down. For example, you've got Section 2 of the Health and Safety at Work Act that defines the duties on an employer. So that says you must, so far as reasonably practicable, ensure the health, safety and welfare of all employees. Now if you're found to have not done this, then you'll be deemed to have broken criminal law. Now let's go through civil law. So remember, we've had a fatality or serious incident. With a civil case, it'll be the claimant. So this would normally be the person that was injured. If it was a fatality, it would be the family of the deceased. They normally go to a solicitor for obvious reasons, and that solicitor will then approach the business or the business's solicitor or the business's insurer. It depends on your setup. The business then make a decision whether they want to defend or pay out. In a nutshell, that's the process. But what they're trying to work out is if the employer has breached the duty of care. Now they call that negligence. It's a civil wrong. As an employer, you have a duty of care to avoid acts or omissions which you reasonably foresee are likely to injure your neighbour. Who's your neighbour probably is the first thing you're thinking of. In the eye of law, it's essentially anybody that could reasonably foreseeably be affected by what you are doing. This was decided in a famous case called Donahue versus Stevenson in 1932. So remember we said about case law and precedent. That case made a decision that defined the precedent being that we have to avoid acts or omissions that we reasonably foresee are likely to injure our neighbour. But the point here is that you're basically just asking the question of who is foreseeably going to be affected by what we are doing or what we're not doing. Your customers, or if you're building a block of flats in a city centre, people that would walk past that, they would fall in as neighbours. And for this example, your employees are your neighbour because your employee has had a fatality and or a serious incident. So this is then what they call the neighbour principle. Your employees, your customers, etc. The final key difference here is the burden of proof. Now, the burden of proof is the legal standard that requires each party to demonstrate via facts and evidence if the claim is valid or invalid. In civil, they're trying to prove negligence on the balance of probabilities. And in criminal, they're trying to prove that you've broken the law beyond reasonable doubt. The simple way I like to look at this is balance of probability, 49-51%. So the scales are slightly tipped in one way. So the balance of probability is that you were in the wrong, you were negligent. They're trying to work out if you had a duty, then they're trying to work out if you breached that duty and if that resulted in injury, damage or loss. In criminal law, because it's beyond reasonable doubt, it's 99.9% sure based on the facts and evidence that you have broken the law, the written law. Coming to the end, we need to work out if something goes wrong, who's going to be hunting your ass down? Is it going to be criminal, the enforcing body, or is it going to be the families via solicitors, etc., for a civil claim? Essentially, it could be both simultaneously. There might be a slight delay in timing with the two, but it could be both. If you have caused a fatality by your operations, you will have the enforcing body hunting you down, and you will more than likely have the civil case. Now, it's interesting fact to kind of think about here, and to get to my point as to which one I think you should focus on the most, is on average, there are under 700 criminal convictions per year in the UK relating to health and safety. But they're currently estimated to be over 1 million civil claims per year. So there's a hell of a lot more civil claims per year than there is criminal convictions. Why is that? Criminal convictions are harder to prove, they cost money, they cost time, so that the enforcing body are only going to bring something against you if they know that they're going to win, based on the burden of proof, because it's 99.9% sure, remember. I think that businesses should be focusing on the civil law side of things. In case law, you've got examples, you've got stories essentially. Some of them are horrendously written, very legal language, but you've got stories of an incident. This happened, this was the duty, and the judge is going through it and debating it, etc. If you've defended yourself on the balance of probabilities, you will have defended yourself beyond reasonable doubt, if that makes sense. It feels a bit backwards. One of the other reasons I think we should focus on civil is because it's about people. And that is the overarching thing for me. It's about creating an environment in which people don't want to sue you. And I think that's the most important thing here. Focusing on compliance and criminal law will only ever give you that. But focusing on civil law creates an environment where you're actively looking after people. Yes, you're doing it because you don't want to get sued, but eventually you'll start to realise that if you look after your people, that's a lot more enjoyable and eventually a lot more profitable. Okay guys, I hope that made sense. I hope your brain doesn't feel as frazzled as mine. Law can get a bit complicated at times, and especially when you're not a lawyer, which I quite obviously am not. But that was civil law versus criminal law in extremely layman terms. But primarily I just think you should just focus on your people. Just look after your people and they'll look after you. This Rebranding Safety, don't forget to check out our podcast as well for your dog walks and your commutes. Drop us in the comment below if you've had any kind of interaction around this process. If you know a hell of a lot more than me, feel free to educate people in the comments. Let's discuss, let's debate. That's what makes us all better people. I'll catch you in the next video. Safe.